Hey everyone, we're looking at allocating the support department costs from our uh, support departments. They're departments. What is a support department? A department that's not necessarily involved, what's not involved in the production process. It's a support department, such as IT or the human resources or the maintenance department, for example. And we've just got to try and allocate those overhead costs between the rest of our production departments fairly. So that's what tonight's all about. There are three main methods, probably only take us about 20 minutes, 25 minutes perhaps will do the job. A few slides to walk through. Let's launch in and get cracking on it. So here's the three methods. First method, direct method, fairly simple. We'll explain that in a second, then step down method, and then finally finish up with the reciprocal method of allocating our department costs. So we've said, look, yes, operating department, the guys that are actually just involved in producing the product or service. You know, it could be the fabrication department and the packaging department and the physically involved in the operation. The support departments are doing just that. They're helping. These guys couldn't survive without them. But we've got to find a way of allocating that is part of the cost of these guys being in operation, is that we need these support departments. So we've got to, that is part of the cost of producing the product. So we're going to get all the overheads, accumulate them together and charge them so we can cost them out. Three methods. Direct, the main difference is the direct method, the support department costs are going directly to the operating departments. Step down, we're going to share at least one of the support department costs to another support department cost first, and then share that cost, step down into the operating departments there. And reciprocal method, probably the most accurate method, but it's we're going to use, there's a couple of ways of doing it. There's a trial and error where you share costs backwards and forwards between the departments until they're all gone. The alternative is the one we'll use tonight, is the simultaneous equation style approach of sharing costs, and you'll see the costs being allocated fairly evenly between all of the departments. So we've identified with this, our case study that we'll be following tonight is these are the two production departments, assembly and finishing, and here's the support departments, maintenance and human resources. And we're trying to find a way of sharing the costs. Well, a common sense approach would be, it sort of makes sense that the bigger the area you take up in the production facility, the factory, then the more maintenance you'll need. You know, there'll be painting and repairing doors and windows and perhaps machinery. The more space you take up, the more maintenance you will need. And also the more employees you have, then possibly the more human resources you would need. That makes sense. So that'll be a reasonable way of allocating the costs amongst the departments. Here is the raw data that we'll be using. And the first question, when we're using the direct method, if we're trying to share maintenance, well, really, it's irrelevant that human resources square meters over here. That becomes irrelevant because we're just focusing on the two production departments and how many square meters is in each of these two production departments. So we can see it's 110,000 each. So it's 110 over 220. Basically, 50% will go to assembly, 50% will go to finishing of our $300,000 maintenance cost. When we have a look at the employees, again, maintenance employees is irrelevant. We're just trying to look at the number of employees. We're going to share this human resources cost between the two production departments based on the number of employees. So we'll fraction it out or pro rata it out if you like. So total number of employees, 48 plus 24 adds to 72. So assembly share, 48 over 72, and finishing share, 24 over 72. And so there it is. Here we go, allocating the costs across 110, 220, 50-50 split for maintenance between assembly and finishing, 48 over 72 going to assembly, 24 over 72 going to finishing from human resources. And so there is the dollar amounts being applied. You could stop the video if you like, just go back and check you're happy with where those figures have come from. And the end result, costs have been shared, costs have been allocated across into the various departments. So assembly's original overhead costs and finishing's original costs, plus their share of maintenance, plus their share of human resources. We've now got the total overheads that we need to apply to, when we're trying to calculate our overhead application rate. Let's have a look at step down method. Now, the first thing you might want to try and do is, well, which way will we go? Should we share maintenance to human resources first and then down to the operating departments? Or should we go human resources, share that to maintenance and then share that cost down? Which way should we go? Well, one method is to say, well, who does more for whom? And it looks like maintenance is doing more for human resources than human resources is doing for maintenance. 12% of maintenance effort goes into human resources, whereas only 10% of human resources is going towards maintenance, so the maintenance department. So therefore, we'll do it this way. We'll share maintenance cost to human resources first, and then human resources down to the other production departments. There's the raw data again. So now the method that we'll be using is this 30,000 comes into the equation, the 30,000 square meters in human resources department. So now it doesn't add up to 220, it adds up to total square meters between the departments that we're going to share maintenance costs. There's a three-way split now, becomes 30,000 plus 110 plus 110, 250,000 will be the denominator, and human resources share of maintenance will be 30 over 250. So let's have a look at that play out. And there it is. In fact, there's maintenance and here's human resources. So total cost of maintenance is the $300,000. Human resources share their square meters, 30,000 square meters divided by the total number of square meters gives us 36,000. Maintenance, again, 50-50 split between finishing and assembly. But instead of at 150,000 each, because 36,000 has gone to human resources, each are getting that 110 share over 250, 110 over 250, or 44% of the 300,000, gives them 132 each. So there we are, sharing the costs, maintenance going to human resources, stepping down to human resources, and then and maintenance being shared between the two operating departments, and from there on, human resources costs being shared between the other. In fact, here it is here. The total number of costs to be shared with human resources, now the original cost in the department plus their share of maintenance costs. Now we're going to share that 2,196,000 between the operating departments. Again, based on the number of employees, we're only sharing it between these two departments. So we gather the number of employees in assembly. There were 48 over the total number of employees, and between the two departments, 72. So their share, 1464. And finishing department's number of employees, 24 over that, divided by the total times the total cost of the human resources, and that will be finishing's share of the human resources cost. Now we've allocated it all. It's all going out of here, being transferred into the operating departments. done the calculations, and there it is, 2 million being taken out of there and shared. And the whole thing, when we come to do it in class, when we come to do questions, you'll see that the whole thing cross adds. You'll know if you've done it correctly because this and this should add to that. So let's compare the difference between the methods. Here's step down and here's direct. Let's have a closer look. Step down, operating department gets 3,296,000. Let's have a look at direct. Operating department only gets 3,290,000. So there's a $6,000 difference between the two methods. If you were the operating department manager, you would prefer them to use the direct method because you're only getting 3,290,000, the share of maintenance and human resources costs. So you can see there is a slight difference. Again, I would argue that this step down is slightly more accurate, slightly fairer sharing of the cost between assembly and finishing. But the fairest method is the reciprocal method. So let's have a look at how that would work. If HR does 12%, sorry, I'll get this right. Yeah, the maintenance, HR is doing 10% of their work is going towards the maintenance department. So therefore, the full cost of maintenance is the cost in their department plus 10% of the HR department. And the same way in the human resources department, their costs are made up of 12% of maintenance cost is going towards them. So total cost in human resources is the actual cost in human resources plus 12% of the maintenance cost. So we've written two equations that we can then solve by the substitution method. We'll see that coming through on the next slide. Here's the raw data that we'll be working with. So I'll just put all the formulas out and then we'll have a look at them together. So there's those two formulas from the previous slide. What we'll now do is, if we know HR is that, we can then plug it in up here. If HR equals all of that, plug it in there, and then we can solve for maintenance. So let's try that. The maintenance cost therefore will equal the 300,000 plus 10% of HR. And what is HR? It's that. So we plug that into the equation, and now we expand the bracket. Next step, expand the brackets. 10% of 2,160,000 is 216,000. 10% of 0.12 M is 0.012 M. So our full equation, M equals 300,000 plus 216,000 plus 0.012 M. We need to get all of the M's onto one side of the equation so we can solve it. So let's subtract 0.012 M from both sides. So we get one lot of M minus 0.012 M, leaves me with 0.988 M, which equals these two added together. 300,000 plus 216,000, 516,000. If we divide both sides by 0.988, we will be left with M. So 516,000 divided by 0.988, M equals 522,267. We can now substitute that back into the HR equation. And we get HR now equals 2,160,000 plus 0.12 lots of maintenance. And maintenance, we said, was that. So we've plugged that in, expand the brackets, 0.12 times the 522 gives me that. So the full cost to be allocated to human resources is that. Again, the whole thing should cross add if we've done it correctly. What we'll end up with. If we do a full table, and we'll, as I said, when we get to see the data in our questions, we'll lay it out, similar but slightly different than this, so that everything cross adds nicely. I mean, this sort of works. What we're saying is that you can see what's happening is maintenance cost. Maintenance is wearing a share of HR. Here's HR costs, and there's this reciprocal arrangement that some of HR costs is going to maintenance, and once we get maintenance costs there now of 522, it's being shared back. Some of those costs are going back to HR to the 62. So that's where it gets its name from, the reciprocal arrangement. Costs are going backwards and forwards between the two service department costs, as well as assembly and finishing. But at the end of the day, by following those equations, allow us to clear out the full cost. Now find where those two costs are equal, if you like, where those two equations meet, and we're able to clear it. We know exactly how much to be able to clear them out. So we accumulate the costs. We end up, the costs have disappeared from HR and maintenance, and they've now been allocated and applied to assembly and finishing. And we've got the total costs in those two departments, which we can then use to come up with an overhead rate. We've decided that perhaps assembly is labour intensive, so we'll use direct labour cost as a way of applying those overhead dollars in the assembly department. And finishing department perhaps is machine intensive, capital intensive, so we'll use machine hours as the denominator in that. We've decided that's the most appropriate way of allocating the costs. So all we do then is apply the data, grab the total dollars in assembly and divide by the total direct labour hours. We get 471%. If you like, for every dollar of direct labour costs, we will apply $4.71. And that will cover the costs of the assembly department. And with finishing, for every machine hour actual machine hour in finishing, we'll apply a rate of $75.32, and hopefully that will help us recoup the overhead costs in the finishing department. Notice the difference though. Here's the direct method, 75.32. When we use the step down method, 75.06. So pretty close, but still different enough. If there were thousands and thousands of machine hours, it's going to add up, obviously. And here with the reciprocal method, 76.45. So there are those rates. We will get together in class and do these calculations. We'll be using Excel to allocate it. We'll draw up a nice little table to share the costs in using the three different methods, and that is how we allocate service department costs to the operating department. So look forward to doing some more work with you when we get together for our next class.